good to be here. I was talking to Phil earlier, and this is very similar to a talk I gave down in Houston before COVID-19, and that talk took 2 days out of my life because I got on an airplane, flew down there, had to get down there early, and then spend the night, and then give a couple talks and fly back. So this is a much better way to do it because it's just an hour out of my day as opposed to 2 whole days. Although I really enjoy New York, and I used to get there on business back in the old days and had a lot of fun there. But listen, since I've been doing this, one of the things I've done is, in addition to seeing couples, I also put together a couple of one-day workshops that I conduct. One for engaged couples, which is my real passion, because I really, if you can help a couple get off on a firm footing, that makes life so much better for them. So I really enjoy doing that. And then I've got one for married couples that I call Marriage Tune-Up, which has a lot of great ways to kind of tune up a marriage. It kind of, it loses a little life and spark and stuff over the years. And so what the Marriage Tune-Up course really is composed of 2 pieces. In the first half, we spend talking about conflict management, how to handle the arguments and the fights and those things we do that get on each other's nerves, and how to process conflict in healthy ways. And then in the afternoon, we talk about how to, once the conflict's out of the way, how to actually stay connected and how to really grow in love and affection for each other. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is about 3 hours worth of material that I'm going to condense hopefully into about 30 minutes. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is supported by science and research. There's an awful lot of research out there now that really identifies the differences between successful couples and ones that really struggle. And so, no surprise, most of what science has learned here recently is supported in the scriptures. So, if we just turn to the Bible, I think that's a pretty good source. Anyway, so so as the backdrop, I use C.S. Lewis's 4 Loves. And if you're familiar with it, he talks about philia, which is the love of friendship, talks about storge, which is the love of affection, eros, which is this kind of infatuation or this love that desires physical union, which is so important within marriage, and then agape, which is this unconditional, this sacrificial love that God has for us, especially Christ. So all 4 of those loves are really necessary for a good, healthy, happy marriage, all right? And so philia, let's talk about that. I mean, that's the love of friendship, and that's based on common interests. And in fact, it is perhaps the most important determinant of a happy marriage. Because if there's good friendship there, if you really connect at a human level, that really that takes care of a multitude of our imperfections and our defects. In fact, the research shows that for 70% of all couples, friendship is the determining factor in whether or not they are satisfied with life in the bedroom. So friendship really translates and provides the foundation for all the other loves that come further down the road. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to talk about here. First is love maps. What John Gottman is the leading researcher. He's been doing research on marriage for 40 years. He's got longitudinal studies that go over 20 years, and he's learned an awful lot of things. And one of the things he found in successful couples is they have what he calls love maps, which means they really know their spouse's, their wife's inner world. They really understand what goes on. They understand what they like and what they dislike. They understand their interests. So, for instance, and I usually pass out, I've got an exercise that I have couples do called love map exercise. But for instance, can you name your wife's 2 closest friends? Can you know what her hobbies are, what her interests are, what her favorite music is? Do you know who her favorite friends are and who her favorite relatives are? What her dreams are, what her favorite flower. I got that one wrong, what her favorite flowers when my wife and I did this. I just assumed her favorite flower was whatever was on sale at the grocery store. Because whenever I was going to buy flowers, I'd go to the grocery store and I'd buy what was on sale. I got that one wrong. I got a lot of them wrong. I got more wrong than she did. But what are your wife's worst fears? What keeps her awake at night? What's her favorite food? If she didn't have anything to do one night, what would she do? Or if she had an entire weekend with nothing to do, how would she fill her time? What are those things that she's passionate about? So, getting to know her, continuing to get to know her, there's this tendency that says, boy, after we've been married for so long that we kind of know everything there is to know about each other. And the fact of the matter is that's really not true. My wife and I went through this exercise. I think we were married, we're going on 40 years now. We're probably married about 34, 35 at the time. And I was embarrassed at how many I got wrong. She got more right than I did, to be sure. And women tend to be more attentive to these things than us men. But there's so much more we can learn. And so to take an active interest in our wife, what our interests are, is a really important thing. So that's the first thing, love maps. We really should know our wife very intimately, okay, as a friend. Second thing is what Gottman calls appreciation or thanksgiving. What are those things you really appreciate about your wife or you are thankful for? And one of the exercises that we do in the workshop is I have, in fact, it may be a good idea for you to have some paper and pencil as we're going through today and jot down some of these ideas, because they'll pay big dividends for you, I think, after we're done. And I take no credit for it. I've stolen all these great ideas from other people. But what do you appreciate about? So make a list of all the things you really appreciate about your wife or you are really thankful for. And it could be her smile and how well she takes care of herself and what a wonderful mother she is and how tender she is with you and how she knows when you're down. It could also be how great her spaghetti is, right? Or, all these things that make her special that you're thankful for. And if you give it some thought, it won't be hard to come up with 20, 30, even 40 things. I know one guy came up with over 50. Okay. So now you've got all these things about her that you appreciate and you're thankful for. What do you do with that? Well, I think two things. First is at the right time, you tell her, you share some of those things with her. You tell her what you're thankful for. The other idea, which is really powerful, is you go off to the store and you buy a box of these, these blank cards. They're blank on the inside. They got a sailboat on the cover or balloons or something, but on the inside, they're blank. And on each of those cards, you write down one thing you're thankful for, just one. And then a couple times a week, you leave that card, in front of the mirror in the bathroom or in front of the coffee pot or on the seat of her car, so that she bumps into these notes and she opens them up. And that's how she kind of starts her day, with a little note from you saying, I really appreciate the love that you put into how you care for our family. And that's an incredibly powerful message to send your wife throughout the week. And so to do that is really critical. And it's a really powerful idea. The idea, the negative things we do, the times we hurt her feelings, the times we are less than patient or less than tolerant or inconsiderate, those are powerful. In fact, the negatives are at least 5 times more powerful than the positives. So successful couples have a ratio of at least 5 to 1 of positives to negatives. And the more positives, the better. So this is one way to chalk up a lot of positives, is to leave these little notes of appreciation and thanksgiving laying around the house. So that's a good thing. So that brings me to the 2 other things. I'm sure you get lots of talks about the importance of the date night, but there's scientific research out there that really suggests the powerful nature of date night. And successful couples are really regular in carving out time each week to get out of the house, to get away from the kids, to spend time just the 2 of them. The problem is a lot of couples do the date night wrong. The date night is not about logistics. It's not about who's picking this kid up from that activity and who's taking the kids to soccer practice and who's helping with homework and who's going to pay the bills. It's not about logistics. So do not talk logistics on the date night. The date night is to talk about what you appreciate, what you're thankful for, what it is you really love about your wife. That's the time to reconnect as lovers, as friends, as people who really appreciate each other, okay? And this I appreciate list or the love map list, these questions that help you get to know her at a deeper level are so powerful during the date night. So as important as the date night is, the other thing that really successful couples do well is they spend a little bit of time, they carve out a little bit of time each day to just connect, just the two of them. The recommendation is 15 minutes a day. Now you might say, man, 15 minutes seems like an awful lot of time by the time I get home from work and the kids and baths and homework and get them to bed and feed them, 15 minutes. 15 minutes is 1% of your day. And so if I ask the question that way, are you willing to make a 1% investment in your marriage each day? You'd say, well, of course I'm willing to make a 1% investment. Well, that's what it is, 15 minutes, 1%. And so successful couple, the ideal time to do it is as soon as you get home from work or, you know, as soon as you're done for the day and you walk out of one room and into the other now that we're on this isolation thing, but social distancing, but is to spend 15 minutes and just reconnect. Tell me about your day. Tell me what went well. Tell me what didn't go well. It's your opportunity to affirm her, to praise her, and to thank her for all the sacrifices she made during the day for you and the kids and the home, etc. Okay? So that's friendship. So love maps, how well do you know your wife? How much do you appreciate and are you thankful for, and do you communicate that each day? Finding time each day to connect one-on-one. And then each week having a little date night. And it gets hard when the kids are small, there's not a lot of money. It's tough. I know one couple, they needed their date night and they couldn't do it. It was the middle of winter and they couldn't afford a babysitter. And so the husband went out and bought a couple of steaks and put some potatoes in the oven, baked some potatoes. And then he went up into the spare bedroom. He set up a folding table, set up a little radio there for some music, lit a couple candles, put a movie in for the kids and said, don't bother us for an hour. So they had their date night in the spare bedroom. And he said it went well for like a half hour, maybe 45 minutes. All of a sudden they heard the kids outside the door giggling and wondering what's going on in there, and they finally let them in. But at least they were able to carve out a little bit of time, have a glass of wine, have a steak, and without even leaving the house or getting the babysitter. Okay, so that's philia. Storge is affection. And, you know, I define that as a gentle caring for one another. One of the most predictive features of the happiness of a marriage is what John Gottman calls turning towards. And what he discovered is throughout the course of a day, couples make what he calls a bid for connection. Generally, it's something verbal that is said. Sometimes it can be a look. And so it could be something as simple as, did you see that there's a robin building a nest in the tree in the backyard? Or is it going to rain today? Or, you know, have you called your mother in a week? Not that you want to talk about robins or rain or your mother. It's just, I want to connect with you. So I just find ways just to get a connection going. I don't need a discussion. I don't want to debate. I just want to connect because I'm just missing you a little bit at this moment. And when your wife throws out a bid for connection, what Gottman found was that if you turn and look at her, 90% of the time or more, there's almost a 0% chance of divorce. 30% or less, about an 80% chance of divorce. That one thing is highly predictive of the marriage and the health of the marriage. And why would that be? Because I don't look at things I don't care about. I only look at things I'm interested in. And so if you turn and look at each other frequently, that's a good sign of the health of the marriage. It's a good sign of the affection. So one of the most powerful things you can do is make sure that every time your wife makes a bid for connection, you actually look at her. And I'll give you a great example. A couple months ago, I'm up here in my office, I'm working on a computer, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and my wife brings me a cup of hot tea. I really like hot tea. And I said, thank you very much. She said, you're welcome, and she left. She came back 10 minutes later. She said, I'd like to have a gentle conversation with you. When my wife starts off with that phrase, I want to have a gentle conversation with you, that means I've done something wrong. And I won't give you a direct quote, but I said something like, shucks, what could I have done wrong? And she said, I was a little offended. I felt a little unappreciated when I brought you that cup of tea and you thanked me, but you did not look up from your computer screen. You did not turn around to look at me. And I'd like to ask you to look at me. And I'm like, I can do that because you're pretty. I like looking at you. That's okay. But I didn't follow my own rule. I didn't look at her when she made that bid for connection by bringing me that tea. So to make a conscious effort to look at your wife as often as you can during the day will pay big dividends. Okay, so that's called turning towards. That's part of affection. All right. The other thing you can do to reactivate affection, to re-stimulate it, and this comes in really handy in your 15 minutes a night, in your date night each week, make a list of the best memories you have with your wife. All those great memories when you were dating, during the engagement, memories about the wedding, about the honeymoon, about that first year of life, about when the kids started showing up. Make a list of all those memories and then share those with her one at a time. And it's great to say, hey, you remember that third date we had when we were in college and we went to the park to fly the kite, but there was no wind and the thing kept dragging on the ground and we couldn't get the kite up. And then, do you remember, wasn't that a great experience? So successful couples do a really good job of remembering the good times and reviewing those, because it keeps me thinking in positive terms about the relationship and about each other. Okay. So making a list and thinking about all those positive times. Okay. So that's Storge, turning towards, which is really predictive of marital harmony. And then this list of your best memories. Then we get to Eros, which is, infatuation, and it's emotional love, and it's the desire to physical union, which is really critical, obviously, in marriage. That physical union is a really important part of what marriage is all about. And so I want to talk about a little bit. I assume there aren't any children around because this conversation will be a little bit more adult-like for the next few minutes. But Gottman did a lot of research, and he came up with, so I think there's 13 things here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 13 things that couples with wonderful lives of intimacy do well. And by the same token, those couples who really struggle and don't do well in the bedroom actually don't do these things. So normally I pass this list out. The husbands devour it. The wives kind of look at it, but not as much as the husbands. But but the room gets really quiet when I pass this handout out. But let me just walk through it kind of quickly. First is they say, I love you every day, and they mean it. Second, they kiss one another for no reason. Just because I was walking by, I decided to give you a kiss. They give each other surprise romantic gifts, flowers on a Tuesday night just because I was thinking of you, or a little gift here, little gifts. They know what turns their partner on physically. They know how to please their partner. They are physically affectionate even in public. So they'll hold hands, they'll touch each other, they'll put their arm around each other, they'll public displays of affection. They do a good job there. They keep playing and having fun together. So they still have fun together. They still do whatever it is they enjoy doing. They ride bikes, they play cards, they play, bean bags in the backyard. They have fun together. They still laugh. They cuddle. So, they'll sit next to each other on the sofa during family movie night. They'll, they make intimacy a priority, not the last item on a long to-do list. And that gets more difficult to do as the kids multiply and the job and the work, etc. So a lot of the spontaneity that was there in the first years of life, marriage goes away, but they make it a priority. And it's okay to actually schedule time for intimacy because it's so important to marriage. You just can't leave it to like, well, maybe tonight if we're not too tired, right? You've got to schedule it and figure it out. They stay good friends. So this goes to philia. This goes to friendship. They cultivate the friendship with each other. They can comfortably talk about their life of intimacy and what works, what doesn't work, and they're able to do that. That can be difficult sometimes. It can be embarrassing, especially for our wives, to talk about these things. They have weekly date nights, which we just talked about. They take romantic vacations. So they're able to get away, just the two of them, once in a while, even if it's for the day or just one night away. But that's the time you invest in the marriage. Because like anything else, if you maintain it, it's going to last a long time. Like your car or any piece of machinery, if you maintain the marriage, you can get away to tune it up, it'll last. and they are mindful about turning towards each other, which is what we just talked about with Storge, with turning towards, okay? Now, of the 13 things I read, only one of them actually happens in the bedroom. The rest of them happen in the kitchen, the living room, out in the backyard, when you go for a walk. They happen in normal course of life. If you take care of the friendship and the affection, the romance will take care of itself. And I like to, when I work with couples, I think their life of intimacy, I think, is like the canary in the mine shaft. If the canary dies, it doesn't mean you've got a bad canary. It means something in the environment polluted it and killed it. Same way with your life of marital intimacy. If it's dying, it's not because you got a bad wife. It's because something's not going right in the kitchen and in the living room. And if you fix the kitchen, living room, the bedroom will take care of itself. All right, so that's eros. Okay, very important part of life. All right, and then we get to agape, which is unconditional, sacrificial love. Okay, it's God's love for us, personified through Jesus Christ. This is the love you professed on your wedding day. This is the vow you made to God, that I will love this woman sacrificially. I will die for this woman. Now, we're not often called to die physically, but we are often called to have parts of us die for our wife. Perhaps our pride, perhaps our ego, our selfishness, the fact that we like watching football on Sunday afternoons, maybe we got to give that up on some Sunday afternoon. So parts of us die, okay? So John Paul II, in both Love and Responsibility, which he wrote before he was Pope, and Theology of the Body afterward, talked extensively about the total gift of self. And that's the gift you gave at your wedding. You said, I give you all of me, not part of me, not 98% of me. I give all of me to you, and I will spend my life in service to you, doing what I can do to please you, to help you, to be there for you, to give you whatever it is you need. And there's going to be a lot of sacrifices along the way to make that happen, some more than others, but that's the deal. And in Matthew, the 20th chapter of Matthew, verse 27, our Lord says, whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave, even as the Son of Man is not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom to many. So Christ is our model, right? He's the bridegroom. The church is the bride. We're the groom. Our wife is the bride. And we are to serve our wife the way Christ served the church. And he died for us. He died for her, as we need to do too. And there's two things. I talk a lot about dominant needs and dominant fears in men and women, but your wife's dominant need is, how would you answer that question? Her dominant need is to be loved. She needs love more than she needs food. And her dominant fear? Dominant fear is to be abandoned, to be pushed aside, to not be important. Okay. And what you will find is most of the arguments you get into, most of the conflicts, most of the hard feelings, most of the time she gets upset with you, one of those two things didn't happen. Either she didn't feel loved or she felt she was no longer important and she was pushed aside. So if you focus your life on how can I show my wife I love her, and how can I show her she's important to me in everything we do, that will go a long way to having a really happy and successful marriage. Okay. So, and I think, I had a priest once early in my marriage, I was complaining about my wife and something or other. And he said to me, Doug, listen, he said, if it's not a sin, give in. So it don't matter. Nothing matters. You cannot compromise in an area of morality. But short of that, if she wants to paint the house pink and orange, who cares? Paint it. If she wants you to mow the lawn 3 times a week, mow the lawn. It doesn't. It's not a sin. Give in. And that's one of the things that successful couples, that's a measure of success for couples, is the degree to which they allow their spouse to influence them. So the amount of influence you have over your spouse is highly predictive of success, but it is especially predictive of a good marriage when the husband accepts influence from the wife. And I think that's really scriptural. God created Adam, and then he put Eve there to be the helpmate. Adam is the head, Eve is the heart. The better job you do listening to your wife and accepting her advice and direction, the better decisions you're going to make. My wife and I have often joked about it. Like, if I was in charge of this house, and we've got 9 kids, youngest of which graduates high school tomorrow, that's a good thing. But it had been a very different house. It would have been neater and cleaner. It would have been more orderly and organized. Those beds would have been made every morning by 7 o'clock, and they'd all sat down for dinner. It would have been a lot like a Marine barracks, but there wouldn't have been a lot of love in it. And, my wife was the one who said, I'll just close the bedroom door if the bed's not made. I'm not going to get in a big fight about it, which made me a little crazy for a while. I'm like, I told that kid he's going to do what I said, she's like, relax, just chill out, So our wives are just so critical to keep us in balance and to keep us, under control, because we tend to get a little crazy sometimes. And, I was listening to a podcast, Peace was talking about the original sin in Adam and Eve, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but he said, there was more than just the sin of disobedience there. There were a lot of other sins too. And he said one of the sins that Adam committed was he did not defend his wife. He did not protect her. He did not stand between her and the snake and tell the snake to get out of there. And that was a pretty powerful thing. So, anyway, that's our job, okay, to protect. All right, so quick summary. Friendship, love maps, appreciation, Thanksgiving expressed regularly, 1% investment each day just in her, 15 minutes a night, and date night once a week. Storge, affection, turning towards, making eye contact with her whenever she turns and talks to you. Make a list of your best memories. Keep those present, share those with her often to bring the two of you together. Eros, take care of life in the kitchen, and the rest of it will work out just fine. And sacrificial, agape, unconditional, total gift of self, not holding anything back, willing to die for our wives. There you go. All right, that's everything I know, and even a few things I didn't. So questions now, Phil, is that the idea? Sure. Yeah. So the love languages, right, is good, and I use the love languages somewhat in the work I do. There's no science, there's no research behind the love languages, so I give it, a certain amount of credibility. I think the advantage of love languages, it gives you a vocabulary to sit and talk to your wife or your fiance about, or in terms of what do you appreciate, what do you like, what can I do for you, and I think the love language is very good. I think being attuned to your wife and her nonverbal communication or physical communication is really important. And if she's upset without her saying anything, because the pots and pans bang or the plates bang or there's in the nonverbal, the huffing or whatever, she just makes a little bit more noise, whatever. You can tell, but being attuned to that is important. And us guys, we don't often, sometimes we don't pay attention to it. We're kind of clueless about this stuff. And so upping your game there to pay more attention to her is a really good, vital idea. Yeah. Thanks, Joachim. Sure. Yeah. You've heard it said, but it's absolutely true. I see it now. I deal with it all the time. The absolute best gift you can give to your children is to love their mother. there's just no replacement for that. And you know, when I'm working with couples and they're heading towards divorce because they're just locked into their positions and they're just angry at each other, uh, when I ask them what kind of damage their divorce will do to their children, how that will hurt them, a lot of times that'll snap them back into reality that, you know what, really need to fix this thing. And I had a priest say to me, actually down in Houston, he said, you know, Doug, no couple has a right to have a child, but every child has a right to parents that love each other. And that's true, because that child was conceived in love and it has a right to grow up in that love as well. And it's more at stake than just the two of you. And I see it now so clearly every single day with the couples and the individuals I work with. The struggles they're dealing with today were set in motion when they were children. And their strengths that they have today were set in motion when they were children. And those kids that come out of really good, solid homes where mom and dad loved each other, they know how to love their spouse. And if they come from a broken home, man, it's tough because they don't know. I deal with a lot of husbands who grew up without a dad and they don't know how to be a husband. They don't have a role model for it. They don't know what to do. And so they got to learn a lot of basic things about what a husband is or how to be a father because they didn't have a father. So you could get a lot of stuff wrong, but if you love your children's mother and do it well in front of them, which is this public displays of affection, right? Which is sitting next to her on the sofa when you're watching a family movie, having her sit next to you at the dinner table so that these kids know she comes first. One of the things I told my kids, I'll tell you this day, I said, listen, you got to understand, man, if the house is on fire and I only got time to save one person, I'm saving your mother. You're gone. I'm not coming back in for you. She comes first, you know? And I'm really clear. They know that. I'm not kidding. I'm like, don't set the house on fire to prove it. But I'm telling you, man, I'm saving her first. You know, the other thing is, you know, they get to be teenagers and they start talking back and getting kind of sassy. The tendency to say, hey, don't talk to your mother like that. But this was a piece of advice I got from a guy a long time ago when my kid's young, and I loved it. And it worked. The right phrase is, hey, son, nobody talks to my wife like that. Nobody. And if you were a stranger, you and I'd be on the ground now. We'd be fighting. But the last thing I'm going to do, I wouldn't let a stranger talk to her like that. I'm certainly not going to let my own son. Nobody gets to treat my wife like that. And that's a powerful message to your kid because it says, wow, you know, mom comes first. And dad's going to defend her no matter what. So I think you just can't overemphasize how important it is for your children for you to love their mother and for them to know that unconditionally. Yeah. Good question, Phil. Thank you. That's really important stuff. Yeah, right. Right. So, you know, yeah, it's a great question to where it's, you know, the raising of children is not an exact science. So you're not going to just put some data into a computer program and crank out the right answer, right? And so it's interesting. My oldest child has moved back in with us during this COVID thing for a couple of reasons. It's kind of fun to have her around. But she was talking the other night. She said, Dad, you remember when, you know, I didn't make my bed and you took the sheets off and I had to sleep the whole night without sheets or blankets? I'm like, I don't remember that. She's like, yeah. So I still remember it. I'm still scarred to this day. I'm like, I didn't mean to scar you. So, you know, some of the things we thought were so important with the first few kids, by the time we got to the last set, it's like, it's not that important. I'm not going to make a big deal about it. So I can tell you, I tried the whole, yeah, okay, I'll take your sheets away. I'll do, you know, and I don't know that it worked. I mean, she makes her bed now, but she's 35. You know, she probably didn't make it in college any more than anybody else did just because I took her sheets away. So, you know, there's a balance in there. Hopefully she accepts your influence, you accept hers. But the thing I've learned is that when it comes to the children, wherever the two of us disagree, she is almost always right. And I am almost always wrong. because she's the heart. I mean, she knows where the kid's heart is. She knows the sensitivities. I'm a little bit more like, you're right, like a German general. I'm like, I'll just put you from the firing squad. I don't, sleep outside in the garage. I don't care. So I just, if in doubt, 9 times out of 10, go with what your wife says. She's going to, where the kids are concerned, she's going to be right more often than not. That's just my experience. And there's probably research out there, but I'm 9 kids, 40 years of marriage. She was right almost every time. The woman you married has defects. She is imperfect because of original sin primarily. And then along the way, she picked up a few other bad habits of her own, right? And there's 7 deadly sins, and we all struggle with the predominant one of those, and a few others come in second place. And so whoever you married, she's going to have imperfections, she's going to have defects. And we've got to figure out how to get, how to not just tolerate it, but actually come to appreciate and love her defects as well. And there was a couple that they have a bunch of kids about my age, and they were kind of a mentor couple to my wife and I when we were young and had small children. And they've both passed away now, but I know their kids. I knew them pretty well. And the husband died probably 5 or 6 years before the wife. And the wife just died here in the past year. And she was close to death. The whole family was there around her. She was in bed. And one of her daughters said, "So, Mom, are you looking forward to seeing Dad when you get to heaven?" And she thought for a few minutes before she answered the question. And then she said, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing him. And the daughter said, "Wait a minute, why did you hesitate?" He said, "Because in heaven, he's going to be perfect. But I really liked his defects a lot too." And so over the course of life, she learned to love his defects. And he had a few. He was Irish. What can I tell you? But the point is, we've got to learn to love our wife's defects as much as we love her virtues. Because no matter who you married, that woman's got defects. Okay? And that's just the way it is. Aquinas said 2 things can cause insanity: love and hate, because both passions are so intense, they can blind you to reality. Well, we're in this love, and we get blinded a lot of times to the defects of the woman that we marry, and then after a while, they come through. So you definitely married someone. So the deal is, yes, you married someone with defects. Those defects can lead to conflicts and problems, which is the first part of my workshop, is on how to deal with those conflicts and how to overcome those conflicts that you're going to have. You cannot eliminate conflict in marriage. It's not possible. So you got to learn how to manage it positively, because you cannot get rid of it. It's going to be there. Yeah, good question. Okay, yeah, good. That's great. I think in terms of resources, I think books written by John Gottman are very good. Gottman. He's a Jewish guy, but he's the leading researcher, and his stuff aligns with Old and New Testament stuff. Sue Johnson has written some big, and she's kind of the founder of emotionally focused therapy, which is very powerful stuff. So Sue Johnson is very good as well. So I do think that one of the things that's predictable to good marriage is with both the couple, husband and wife, but since I'm talking to you guys, for the husband, to have a bit of a prayer life, to have time each day that you spend in prayer. Because the better you become as a man, which you can define, the better Christian you become, the better husband you're going to become as well. And also in your prayer, you can sit there and say, "Lord, my wife is making me crazy. Help me understand. Help me figure out. Help me be more patient. Help me tolerate. Help me understand where she's coming from." And so when you can talk over some of these frustrations that you have with your wife in the prayer, especially if you can do it in front of the tabernacle or blessed sacrament, it really helps put it in perspective. And one of the things my wife and I found, times when we get into fights, we're really angry at each other. If we decide to take a time out and go over to church and sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament for a while, we come out of it and all of a sudden, it isn't that big a deal. Whatever you're so angry about just doesn't seem all that important when you think about it in front of the church. So, I think that It's like anything else, right? If you want to get a college degree, you're going to set aside time every day to study and go to class. If you want to be a world-class husband, you got to set aside time each day to study it. Pray about it. And I think the best way to do it is pray about it, read the scriptures, pray about it. And, you know, and read books that are out there on marriage that are written by good, solid Catholic writers. You know, I got a new client I just started seeing, and he'd been away from the church for a long time, and he made his way back. And so, you know, when you start with a new client, you spend a lot of time talking about childhood. How'd you grow up? What was life like? You know, what happened to you as a kid? And he grew up in a very religious family, but he said, my mother was always angry, just always angry and upset and yelled at us a lot. He said, one of the things that sent me away from the church was I came home from college, and Sunday nights we would say a rosary together, but I realized that in the middle of this rosary, my mother was angry, and she was saying the rosary out of anger. And I thought, there can't be anything good about the rosary if this woman, even when she's saying the rosary, can't be happy with it, you know? And it sent him kind of away from the church for a while. So saying the rosary is a really good thing. Doing it when you're angry, not so good, right? So it wasn't the act of the rosary that bothered him, but it was his mother's behavior during the rosary that bothered him, right? So our kids learn far more from what they observe us do than any lecture we ever give them. And so doing good things is a whole lot more important than saying and talking good things. So it's the example that's just so powerful. And I see it now in this profession where I deal with people all the time. It's a lot of the emotional scars they have come from more so from the way they were treated than, you know, it's how you get people who grew up in, you know, seemingly really good families who end up with a lot of problems because there was a disconnect between what mom and dad said and what mom and dad did. The doing is more important than the saying. That's a big question. I could talk on that for a really long time. Let me just, I guess what I'd say is, listen, when God looked at Adam and said, it's not good for that boy to be alone. I need to create, you know, a helpmate for him. He did not create a best buddy for Adam to hang around with and drink beer and watch football on Sundays. That's not what he created. He created a being radically different, human, but really different. And those differences can make us crazy, but they're there for a reason. And so the two are one, and she will complement you and you will complement her. You will complete each other. So the idea is to really try to develop that philosophy of the woman I studied about who loved her husband's defects, to love the differences in your wife and to come to really value those is a really important thing. So, and yes, you've got different temperaments, you've got different ways of doing things, but framing is so important. And when you look at it is so important because if you look at it as a blessing, that's going to take you down one path. If you look at it as a curse, it's going to take you down a different path. So if you look at your wife's blessings or her differences as a blessing, that will help you love her more and see the real value she brings to the relationship. So I know we're almost out of time. Can I get another minute, Phil? Yeah.
Sure.
So I had a couple, and this guy lived in the suburbs, worked in the city, took the train to work every day, prided himself on the fact that from the minute his alarm went off in the morning to the moment he walked out of his door to go to the train station, 15 minutes. That's all he took. Showered the night before, laid his clothes out the night before, put a lunch together the night before, put his briefcase by the front door, laid his shoes out. He got up, did everything, boom, he was out in 15 minutes. Yet my wife takes a half an hour just to decide what to wear. She'll put on a top, she'll take it off, put on a different one. She'll put on a skirt, take it off, put on some pants. She just can't decide. It makes me crazy. I can't stand it. We get in a fight every morning because she just takes forever to get ready. I just put something on and go. So as we talked about it, I said, well, what do you admire about your wife? And he said, well, she's incredibly artistic. She changes the decorations in the house every single month. So November it's Thanksgiving, and December it's Christmas, and January it's winter, and February it's Valentine's Day, and March she's got a different thing every month. The house is beautiful. I said, so your wife's artistic? Said, yeah. I said, so maybe what she's wearing is an expression of her artistic flair, not a matter of the fact she can't make up her mind. And the wife looked at him and said, you idiot, that's what I've been trying to tell you. Depending on the day and the weather, that determines what I'm going to wear, because that's the message I'm communicating to people. And she works at a school. My students, I want to communicate a message by how I dress. Well, I got to figure that out. And all of a sudden he was like, wow, that's a whole different thing. So he saw this, her taking a half hour to get dressed as a bad thing. Now he saw it as a good thing. And then he said, you know what? Now I really like sitting there and watching her, because it's kind of fun to try to figure out what she's going to wear. Because I now know it's an expression of her creative genius and what a beautiful person she is on the inside. It's not a defect of hers. So if you can look at those things your wife does as blessings as opposed to irritations, that could be helpful. You know what? Thanks for inviting me to do this. I feel very blessed to have this opportunity to take this information that I've learned that I think is so valuable. And I wish I'd have learned as I was bringing this stuff home, as I was learning it in school here, because I spent 36 years in the corporate world before I started doing this. I'd bring this home and my wife would be like, man, you know, if we'd have known this 35 years ago, what a difference it would have made in our marriage. I'm like, yeah. So I just thank you, Phil, for inviting me to do this. I think it's an honor. It's a blessing for me to be able to share this information. And I just hope you take just one or two nuggets out of today and apply it in your marriage. And I think you'll find, even if you do just one or two things we talked about, that things will get better, things will improve. And that's the idea. So I just thank you for giving me a chance.